Hi everyone, my name is Matt Hopley and I'm LRI Engineering's branch manager for the Alberta operations. LRI provides fire and life safety expertise to the built environment. Today I'm talking with Shawn Young. Shawn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Matt. As you said, my name is Shawn Young. I'm currently the branch manager for the Ottawa Office, LRI Engineering, and I've been with the company for a little over 20 years now, so seen some things.
Yeah, you'll have lots of good stories, I'm sure. And so today, what we're talking briefly about is uncovering risk and regulatory compliance or achieving regulatory compliance at your facility. So whether you're the owner of a company, owner of a property, you're a property manager, you're a health and safety professional, you're an insurance professional working with your clients dealing with risk, or just someone with a general interest in maintaining safety at a facility, you know, it's important to find ways to uncover that risk and really get a good grasp on the risk level or risk tolerance that your facility has and whether or not there are any hidden or uncovered deficiencies or hazards that are in place on your properties. And so really what we're going to be talking about today is going through and evaluating your sites and trying to come up with ways to audit and inspect so that you can find and uncover those hazards and really get a good grasp on what the risk level is in your sites. And so really let's start off with kind of defining the problem, right? How well do you know the hazards and risks present at the sites you're responsible for? You know, how do you know what that risk is? Are you sure? What means do you have available to kind of uncover any hidden problems or issues that might creep up? You know, Shawn, how do you go about answering that question?
Yeah, so I guess the visual part is it is the experience level that you have to be able to see something to know that there's potentially an issue. So primarily what we like to do is talk to operations or building owners to get an understanding of what the potential operation is, if there's anything special we have to consider, or why they may perceive that there's an issue, and then we would typically walk the site or conduct a review of the specific area that they want us to look at. And then we go back and look at a bunch of codes. So primarily our reports deal with Ontario Building Code or the Ontario Fire Code, or actually National Building Code or National Fire Code, or any of the years that all of the years that they've been published, depending on how old the building is. And we try to make sense of things, right? So you try to understand if the issue you're seeing is an actual issue, and you can rely on the resources such as the codes to make sense of those things. And that's primarily how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's the same method that I end up using when I'm looking through sites and facilities, right? Is you go through, you audit, you inspect, you document, you try to find what's going on, and then you look to see how that stacks up against the baseline compliance case, right? And so it's following that methodology, going through it so that you have a good grasp on the overall risk. And so, I mean, it's kind of like you never know what you're going to find until you look. And so you can't predict everything that an investigation is going to uncover. You might have a good sense of where it wants to go, but then all of a sudden you have a different risk direction that something surprises you. And so then you have to come up with an understanding of like you said, is this really a hazard, or is it more something that just looks out of place or out of the ordinary and is just new and interesting? And so if you think about an example or a case study, can you kind of walk us through a story? Can you walk us through one of the sites you've done?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It can be very subtle. It can be a very subtle thing. Like, I won't give you an exact case, but typically the things we see is it's over time stuff. It's different ownership stuff. It's stuff of deviation of original design, even slightly, can really affect things, right? So that's why, like as an example, changes of use of spaces. So you may have, like in one case, not to get too specific, but like we'll usually see either an office space converted into a service space, or a storage space, or a stores, with multiple different types of products and things like that. Just done. These things they just happen. And it's mostly, like I said, it's just an over time change of use, change of ownership, change of, their requirements and needs that they have to do these things. So service rooms also turn into office space, or they can, that's typically, like I said, it's very subtle things. Mag locks or door locks put on doors that were supposed to be egress routes, and they're improperly installed or whatnot. That's common, very common. These are the kind of things that we see on a day-to-day.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched your point about the timing, or sort of the hazards building up over time is definitely something that I have seen, right? Like, it's rare that somebody is compliant everywhere. It's really, I've kind of seen sort of two camps. Is on one hand, you've got people who have a process or work in an area of a building on a day-to-day basis. They see it over and over and over again, and as a result of that repetition, they keep a good eye on it, and it stays up, up to conformance. There's no real hidden hazards, but then, maybe some areas where people aren't as involved or don't look as frequently, can get into disarray over that time, right? You can build up the hazards, maybe a dumping ground for storage. You never really know exactly what that's going to look like. But then on the flip side, also got the case of the drift, as you mentioned, right? Where if somebody's using something or doing something all the time, every day, they can be a little bit of complacency, and that's a pretty negative term, but it's just more so about that drift. It's that you can work over time and sort of build up a risk tolerance that's actually higher than what you really want to be doing. You can let that hazard start to be familiar, and people kind of just judge the level of safety based on what happened last week, right? So we haven't exploded yet, so we're fine. Yeah. That doesn't actually measure your true risk, right? That's just luck sometimes. Yep. And so, when you go through an actual hazard assessment, or you go through these building code compliance assessments or fire code compliance assessments, what does that look like for your process? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's because there's so many different types of audits that we do. It's not just one audit. So, like, as an example, we do building condition reports or building condition audits that can relate to end of life, life cycle renewal, etc. So it could have a time frame based on the client, depending on, so generally, depending on the type of audit. There's another one which fire code audits and whatnot. So depending on the type of audit, it's the same process, essentially. I would go in, we'd either meet in a team or by ourselves, discuss, have a meeting with the client, and the operations manager usually is the one that we talk with, or an operations staff member, very knowledgeable. And then we walk the site with them, hopefully, because I'm going to be pointing out things as well. I always try to educate as I'm walking around, which whether they like it or not, but I try to offer that extra. It's very hard not to see things when you're only looking at one specific thing. But and then we go back, we collect our data, and you can't memorize the codes. So I know where a lot of things are, and I know a lot of things, but you still have to reference the codes. So you go back and you dig deep into the books, and try to understand and make sense of things, and then you write a nice little report and give it to them. And that's usually where it ends. We usually have a meeting after about the report if there's any questions or whatever. And in some cases, we move further to a next phase, which is an assisting. We assist them with actual upgrades. So we can either assist with a schedule if it's a fire code violation or fire code related. Typically, they're under an order, or they could be close to an order or something. So they need, but these changes take money, and they have budgets just like everybody else. So we try to work with them and the fire department to come up with a reasonable schedule. And that's kind of where that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? I kind of in terms of your response, you mentioned referring back to the codes and kind of looking at that, finding a baseline, right? And I think that kind of speaks to the systematic methodology, right? So whether that system and the method comes from a code or a standard that's in place, or it's just a level of expertise that you've built up over a period of time, right? There isn't always a standard application for a given type of inspection. Sometimes there are, and it's worth knowing about them. But in other cases, you can wind up with just needing to use your expertise and kind of work through problems as you noted.
Yep.
And so if you had to think of, let's say, top 5, what's your top 5 finds, right? If somebody's looking out at their site today, what are they likely to find a non-compliance in?
Okay, top 5. So the biggest ones are the easiest ones that I see, and I see them all the time, is damaged fire separations, problems with the egress. By that I mean the installation of locks on doors or additional doors in locations that are not supposed to have them. So that's 2. 3 would be storage practices. It's huge. So storage practices, because buildings are not really designed for storage very well. That's kind of a given. It's just the way it is. So storage in service rooms, storage in exit stairs, excessive combustible storage in hallways, things like that. We see that all the time. So that's 3. 4 would be new construction. See that all the time. A mezzanine or a storage room in a building that's required to be non-combustible, built out of wood. That happens all the time. And, so it doesn't comply with like sprinklering and the combustible construction doesn't comply, et cetera. And then the 5th one would be changes of use, which is what I use as an example. So that always happens.
Yeah, I would echo those. I mean, I would say if I had to pick one, it would certainly be on your list is with respect to storage, right? Storage is always a problem, right? And it's almost irrelevant of which occupancy you're talking about. It can be, residential, it can be business, it can be healthcare, it can be industrial. Everybody has to store something, right? Whether it's your raw goods that you're taking in from shipping and receiving, whether it's your WIP, whether if you're a producer, you got finished goods or you got supplies coming in. Everybody's doing something, and so you need to put your material somewhere, and it's very easy to get non-conforming storage. It's obviously more of a hazard in a place like a warehouse, where you've got a high fuel load, usually high rack storage. But keeping tabs on storage heights or storage densities, IO widths, having a familiarity with your sprinkler system, right? That's another big one. Is what is the sprinkler system's hazard level? What is it allowed to protect? And are you storing something that's more dangerous than that? Those are on the top for me. And so, in terms of what we sort of do for clients on sort of a high level basis, what would you say we try to do with clients? At the end of the day, what are we doing for them?
Trying to point out the issues that they can fix to make sure their building is compliant, and trying to educate. At the end of the day, that's pretty much what I try to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? That education is really the key factor, right? So whether somebody wants to educate themselves or whether they need to reach out for some additional expertise, right? Nobody's an expert in everything. And so you got to kind of reach out to kind of find someone who can help you understand and identify those risks, right? Hazard identification is its own thing, right? People get, they have tools to help do with HazID so that they can find hazards that may otherwise go unnoticed. And so, I mean, as it relates to education, that's what we're here for. If people want to reach out, you can always reach out to Shawn or I or anybody at LRI. You can reach out on via our website, lrifire.com. Another few different ways or resources that you might look at are the National Fire Protection Association, Society for Fire Protection Engineers, and NRC, National Research Council. Online, you can go in and look up, and NFPA has free access to codes and standards. NRC issues a lot of different provincial and national building and fire codes, and that's a good way to start just the background homework on compliance is get a copy of the code, understand the parts that apply to what you're doing, check it out. And so, overall, it's about education and looking. Any last thoughts?
No, I think that about covers it.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Shawn.
Thank
Bye
you,
for
Matt.
now.
Have a good one.